Hi, Roger. It's Glenn Donovan here. I wanted to respond to the video you had just published. And I got to tell you, I'm really impressed with what you did and your thinking. But I also wanted to respond to a few of the things. I want to try and do it pithily here, but with maximum respect, and also not just respect for what you said, but the fact that you see yourself as needing to understand this yourself, and you're thinking it through and you're educating yourself and doing many things which I think are very important for Americans to do and people want to govern themselves to do. Also, I thank you for your service in a very real way. I'm the only member of my family not to serve in the military, male member. I'm not going to get into any of that today. Why? I'm just saying thank you for your service in a legitimate way. I understand what people who take an oath to put their lives down for this country have actually done, and I'm eternally grateful that people choose to do that. All that said, I think there's two things that you're missing that I'd like to lay out. One is I think you're ideologically, you're actually smart ideologically. How do I say this without sounding like a jerk? I think you're missing some things ideologically. Just let me put it plainly. And I want to lay them out. And then I want to weave in how Barack Obama plays into that. Because I think you're missing, I just don't think you know as much about Barack Obama as you think. I think your proximity to him in your job, by the way, I've known people in the Secret Service who were close to them. They assume they know much more about these people, but they don't read the biographies, so they don't get the picture. I don't think you've read a biography of Barack Obama. Like one of the conclusions I'll give to you at the end here, actually up front, is go read A Rising Star, if you haven't, by Garrow, published after the second term. Garrow's done MLK and others. He's like a leading, legit, world-class biographer, and you'll understand Barack Obama ideologically a lot more. So what do I think you get wrong or are missing? First of all, I don't think you understand what the term socialism means, actually. So let me lay out what it means, and then there's not the reason why you might not know what it means is because the left intentionally confuses people about these terms, so we don't talk about them, and they can always trip us up. They'll tell you that that socialism's like, well, people still vote, but the government and means of production's kind of owned, but none of that is what socialism. Socialism is a phase of civilizational development on the arc of German historicism's sort of how they see the development of humanity. Yeah. So classical liberalism was seen as a what should we say a developmental phase in human civilization that was insufficient to address the needs of society and build a just society for all. And so the idea of socialism comes along, and a very easy way to think about it non-ideologically and thinking about Marx, and by the way, this idea predates Marx, is separate from Marx, right? It was actually coined by a French philosopher named Fourier and one other in like the 1810, 1820, something like that. Same people who coined the term feminism, by the way, not coincidentally. But what it means is more like the ideas of John Stuart Mill or Bentham, Jeremy Bentham, this utilitarian idea about government, that government is empowered to do whatever it can do that meets the needs of the majority of the people and doesn't do too much harm to the minority when doing that. So one of the things that socialism does is it empowers government to sort of be this utility maximizing function, and then what happens is it depends who gets into power how that plays out. So you could use that and create fascism, and fascism is a form of socialism. If you don't know this, go read Giovanni Gentile, the philosopher who actually invented fascism, socialist, hardcore socialist, along with Mussolini. They were buddies in this, and it was a national socialism, which not coincidentally is what Nazism was, right? And so socialism is this idea that the government can do more. It depends how you orient it. So, for example, if you look at the fascism in Italy, it was purely around the nation, right? And the people. But it wasn't about a racial definition of the people. Same thing in Spanish fascism, by the way. Yet in Germany, it was about the Aryan people and the supremacy of them. In Japan, it was an imperial kind of thing, but it could look fascist, very similar to fascism. But there was this absolutely just Japanese supremacist kind of thing that was different than the Germans, like not quite genetic supremacy, the way they want to cleanse the gene pool, but still a supremacy. So socialism is a very powerful idea that takes the limits off government, empowers it to do whatever it needs to do. Now, that could be over-regulating the economy, right? Setting prices. It doesn't mean it has to take the property away from everybody. Socialism, think about the word. It's oriented towards the social world, our society, for government, right? Capitalism is a slag term made up against free markets and free people by communists who wanted to deride it. There's no such thing as capitalism. There's freedom, economic liberty, the ability to own property, and then axiomatic in your ability to own property is to trade it or to hold it. That it has value is no different from a socialist world. Right? Socialist property has value as well. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, what Marx invented was something called scientific socialism, which is what we think of as Marxism, which is a materialistic justification for understanding why socialism is a necessary phase to move through before we get to communism, right? And a lot of other things. It really takes Hegel's ideas and grounds them in a materialism. Hegel was more of a mystic, right? So you see this progress, and that's why, and that enabled them to claim science, and that's why Marx created scientific socialism, because it wasn't scientific until then, and that's what Marxism is, okay? So I think if you research those terms, you do fine. You also talk about postmodernism, and you cite, I can't remember who you cited. It was such a strange cite to me. Let me shortcut this. You're right to ID postmodern as the problem. It's the focus on discourse. That's the issue, right? And essentially, we live in Herbert Marcuse's world, right? So you read some of these people. Gosh, I can't remember who you cited again. The person was looking for a method, right? Well, there's much deeper thinkers and Marxist and sort of the postmodern side we're looking at this. But Herbert Marcuse has got ties Foucault and the Marxists, everything up a nice, neat little bow, and really plants the foundation for for CRT, right, for critical legal theories and critical race theory, which by the way, let's bring Obama into it. So Obama is in Harvard, 88, 89, 90. I can't remember all the dates on this. I'm directionally correct, and it's right in that era. Oh, by the way, he's the one who led the student walkout to demand Derek Bell be brought to the Harvard campus as a tenured professor. Did you know that? Derek Bell was the architect of critical legal theory. Kimberly Crenshaw is the architect of intersectionalism. She doesn't like critical legal theory because it only focuses on sort of a very narrow sort of a social problem. And she blows it up and sees how we can bring in multidimensional victimhood, essentially, multidimensional oppression. And like Foucault's ideas, and then, Marcuse's ideas about, Angela Davis was like, Marcuse's like, a protege and stuff, radical revolutionary, killed people. Like, these are like awful people, by the way. These are like not, and so the idea that that Obama wasn't a radical back in 1990, buddy, is your ignorance, not reality. He's been radical for forever. But as he said to Van Jones later, and Van mentioned this, right? He said, you should give up the radical pose in favor of the radical ends. This is exactly what Barack Obama did. Barack Obama was on this quest for some kind of legitimacy throughout his whole life because he was very lost as a young man. I won't get into all that. If you read Rising Star, you'll see that. Now on to Barack Obama in policy. You didn't cite any specific policies in talking about him. I found that odd. You're a military guy, so let me just cite the one policy, the one aspect of Barack Obama's behavior that I found astonishing and so damaging to our country. So in Afghanistan, he claimed he wanted to pull out, but realized that he couldn't do that. So then he said he wanted a surge. I don't know if you remember that flip-flopping of his, right? And then we were going to do a surge to win and then pull out. And he actually announced the date of the pullout and then announced the surge at the same time. The surge, and there's a great book by Bob Woodward on this. If you should read it. I know maybe you were around him when he's doing this, but if you don't really study how the policy gets made, you may get confused about what's actually going on. So Bob Woodward, Obama at War, whatever it was called, wrote a great book about this. And you see that all Obama wanted to do was the least plausible effort to look like he was doing a surge. Whereas Obama did foreign policy for domestic consumption. You seem to miss that. And he also sponsored these color revolutions in Libya and many other places, Morocco, Egypt. We were behind all this stuff, dude. Those revolutionaries were in conference rooms in Herndon, Virginia, getting trained by us, right? So this to me was very odd because it was a very imperial kind of mindset. And even though he thought he was on the right side of things, the blowback is inevitable and it's always a disaster. Look at Egypt. It's a perfect example, right? He puts the Muslim Brotherhood in power. Well, they're bloody jihadists. And again, he's seduced by his time at Columbia with Edward Said and Edward Said's fine ideas about Orientalism, which are all total nonsense, by the way. It's a Marxist reinterpretation of history that ignores most of it. Like the fact that Islam's been a conquering, marauding empire that attacked the West 500 times more than the West ever attacked it. That never gets mentioned, by the way, the proportionality argument. Again, you read real history like I have. I'm old, dude. I'm very interested in the world. I read lots of history and I have for years. I got interested in Islamic history 25 years ago after 9/11. So I've been reading for a long time. And so I just think you don't understand these things as well. And then what Obama did is he built a foundation for radicalism. You don't like the term woke. Let me explain what woke means. Another thing you're missing. Woke is the term that that the guy who Pablo Freire, who posited social emotional learning, created. And woke is to have your consciousness awoken to basically oppression, a la sort of the Marcusean postmodern interpretation of Marxism, like. And then, of course, it's a pedagogy for the oppressed, right, is what he wants to do. And all his pedagogy does. And that's what's destroyed American education, because that was implanted in our American education institutions in the 90s and early 2000s, with Obama's cheerleading it the whole time, right? So woke is Paulo Freire is, not Pablo, excuse me, Paulo Freire is considered the father of woke. Yeah, and so it's one who's been conscientized, has had their consciousness awoken. It's done via an educational process. It's really propaganda and brainwashing. It's what they're doing in our schools. Okay, I don't want to go on any longer than that. I thought what you said was really interesting. I just saw these gaps, and I really wanted you to get that there's a little more here that you might be missing that would help you see it a little more clearly. Obama's radicalism was very understated, but as I looked into each policy and the appointments he made, the people, and where he pushed things, every time it was to the most radical fringe. Essentially what he did is expanded the Overton window, so the radicals could do more and more, and he certainly did a lot of that in his own administration. He also set up the entire DEI agenda to be implemented under his administration. He converted thousands political employees to career employees. He spent the entire administration doing that, by the way. It was a huge, hard project for him to do. Bureaucratically, administratively, required some legislation, different executive orders, all kinds of agency actions, all kinds of work with their union, all kinds of stuff with OMB. It took 7.5 years to get it all done. Like within 3 weeks of him leaving office, he signed the final EO that converted thousands of hardcore radical Barack Obama political appointees into career employees. And if you don't know they're hardcore radicals, that's okay. But you seem to not believe the hardcore radicals. Like Barack Obama is an extremely radical guy. He just wants to govern in a way that does two things. A, assured his political success. And that's always, if you want to understand Barack Obama, understand he's always working within the realities of what he can do politically for his own good. That's why he has George Clooney write that letter, not him. Think about what an act of cowardice that is. Second thing is he's advancing causes for the left all the time as much as he can, but in a way that's intelligent, builds foundation. What Barack Obama really did is he politically organized the left. He made the Democrat Party irrelevant, by the way. I don't know if you've noticed that. It's the NGOs and the big money in the PACs, the dark money, and all the rest of that counts now, and they run everything, and the state governments do. But there's zero power for the National Democrat Party, and Barack Obama did all that. Okay, buddy, think you're a great guy. Love you to keep on, and I am going to. That was just a timer. Something I got cooking. Perfect timing. All right, have a great day. I hope this was helpful.